Members of the Congress, it is my great privilege, and I deem it a high honor and personal pleasure to present to you Her Excellency Minister Benazir Bhutto, Prime Minister of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of myself and my delegation in this hall, permit me to extend my warmest congratulations to you on the assumption of your high office. Mr. President, distinguished members of the Congress, Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you. We gather together friends and partners who have fought side by side for liberty. We gather together to celebrate freedom, to celebrate democracy, to celebrate the three most beautiful words in the English language: we the people. I stand here conscious of the honor you bestow on my country and on me. I am not new to America. I recall fondly my 4 years at Harvard. America is a land of great technology. America is a land of economic power. Your products are sent all over the world, a tribute to the creativity and productivity of your people. But your greatest export is not material. Your greatest export is not a product. Your greatest export is an idea. America's greatest contribution to the world is its concept of democracy, its concept of freedom, freedom of action, freedom of speech, and freedom of thought. President Bush, in his inaugural address, spoke of a new breeze across America. In fact, this new breeze is sweeping the whole world. In Afghanistan, the people have freed their country of foreign occupation. In South America, the generals are returning to their barracks and the people to the halls of government. In the Orient, the old order is changing and the demands growing. Glasnost and perestroika are shaking the East Bloc, the ultimate tribute to the strength of freedom, to the desire of people, wherever they live, to control their own destiny. And it is the words of Lincoln that are quoted: a government of the people, by the people, for the people. For many of us, the root of all this progress, the foundation of democracy, lies on this continent, 200 years ago in your Covenant of Freedom, in words penned by Madison, we, the people. My presence before you is a testament to the force of freedom and democracy in Pakistan. Throughout 1988, the call for democratic change in Pakistan grew louder. After a decade of repression, the wave of freedom surged in Pakistan. On November 16th, the people of Pakistan participated in the first party-based election in 11 years. The Pakistan People's Party won a convincing victory, showing wide national support all across the 4 provinces of our great country. Democracy had at last returned to Pakistan. We, the people, had spoken. We, the people, had prevailed. In its first days, our new government released political prisoners, legalized labor and student unions, and restored press freedom. We signaled our right of recognition to the role of the opposition in a democratic society, giving them free and regular access to the state media for the first time in our history. We set as our focus reconciliation, not retribution. Some claim to fear revenge against the murderers and the torturers, revenge against those who subverted constitutional law. But, ladies and gentlemen, there was no revenge for them. For them and for dictators across the world, democracy is the greatest revenge. For us, the election was the end to an unspeakable ordeal. A democratic government was overthrown in a military coup, and for 11 years, dictatorship ruled our nation. Political parties were banned, political expression prohibited. There was no freedom of press. The Constitution was suspended and amended into virtual non-existence. Women were subjugated, and laws written specifically to discriminate against them. Political opponents were imprisoned, tortured, and hanged. It was the luckier ones who went into exile. Our struggle was driven by faith in our people's ability to resist, faith in our religion, Islam, which teaches us that tyranny cannot endure. Tyranny cannot endure. It is the same faith which has fueled the battle for freedom next door in Afghanistan. Both our countries have stood alongside the Afghans in their struggle for more than a decade. For 10 long years, the people of Pakistan have provided sanctuary to our Afghan brothers and sisters. We have nurtured and sustained their families. More than 3 million refugees are on our soil. Still more are coming, fleeing the bloodshed, and we have welcomed them, housed them, and fed them. And for 10 long years, the United States, in a united bipartisan effort of 3 administrations and 6 Congresses, has stood side by side with Pakistan and the brave Mujahideen. We both deserve to be proud of that effort, but that effort did not come without a price. Our villages were strafed, our people killed. Our peaceful country has changed. The war has brought the curse of drug addiction to Pakistan. Over 1 million heroin addicts to a land that never before knew it. Our forests have been depleted, yet our commitment to pay the price for freedom has not been shaken. And now, despite the Soviet withdrawal, peace has not returned to Afghanistan. Even now, the Soviet government is giving full backing to the Kabul regime's efforts to cling to power. It has left in its possession vast quantities of lethal weapons, weapons supplemented by a regular supply of hardware, including Scud missiles, some of which have already hit Pakistan territory. More threats have been received, threats to supply new weapons never before seen in the region. The Soviets have gone, but the force of foreign arms continues to deny Afghanistan the ultimate fruit of victory, self-determination. Those responsible for a decade of death and destruction now blame us for the continuing bloodshed. They accuse us of interfering in Afghanistan. Distinguished members, nothing is farther from the truth and nothing is more unjust. Our concerns are for a stable, independent and neutral Afghanistan. An Afghanistan where the people can choose their own system, their own government in free and fair elections. We in Pakistan would like to see the refugees return home in peace and dignity. Unfortunately, the conflict is not over. It has entered its closing stage, a stage often the most difficult and most complex. Distinguished friends, Pakistan and the United States have traveled a long road with the Afghans in their quest for self-determination. Let us not, at this stage, out of impatience or fatigue, become indifferent. We cannot, we must not abandon their cause. The world community must rise to the challenge which lies ahead, the challenge of achieving a broad-based political settlement to the war, of rebuilding a shattered country, of helping the victims of war, of developing the Afghan economy. Mr. Speaker, now Pakistan and the United States enter a new phase of an enduring relationship. Our shared interests and common international goals have not disappeared. If anything, they have been strengthened. Our partnership is not a friendship of convenience. For decades, we have been tied together by mutual international goals and by shared interests. But something new has entered into the equation of bilateral relations: democracy. We are now moral as well as political partners. Two elected governments bonded together in a common respect for constitutional governance, accountability, and a commitment to freedom. Because of the intensity of our struggle for freedom, we will never take it for granted in Pakistan. Our democratic institutions are still new and need careful tending. Democracy's doubters have never believed that it could address the problems of developing countries. But democracy in Pakistan must succeed to signal nations in political transition all over the world that freedom is on the rise. This is the time in Pakistan when democracy's friends must come forward. We need the time and the resources to build a truly strong constitutional government. If we succeed, all democracies share in that success. Today, we are on the threshold of a new democratic partnership between our two countries, addressing new priorities, a partnership which addresses both our security concerns and our social and economic needs, a partnership which will carry us into the 21st century, strong in mutual trust, close in common interests, constant to the values we share, working in association with democratic governments all across the world to promote the values of freedom. This is the partnership, the new democratic Pakistan we hope to build with your continuing help. The time is right, my friends, to make miracles in Pakistan. The dictatorship of the past has given way to the forces of the future. The years of social and economic neglect beg for redress. So I come to this land of freedom to talk about the future of my country and the future of freedom everywhere, the future of our children, my child, and yours. I come before you to declare that we cannot choose between development and democracy. We must work for both. Partners in democracy must now focus attention on urgent problems which affect mankind as a whole. The widening gap between the rich and poor countries, environmental pollution, drug abuse and trafficking, the pressure of population on world resources, the full economic participation for women everywhere. We must join together to find remedies and solutions for these problems before they overcome us. Of all the crises facing us, my government is giving the highest priority to the problem of drug abuse. We are determined to eradicate this plague from our country. To that end, we have established a new ministry for narcotics control. We are taking vigorous action against drug offenders. Our close cooperation and that of other nations must be strengthened if we are to turn back the tide of drugs sweeping your nation and mine. So too must we work together as partners to avert the catastrophe of a nuclear arms race. Speaking for Pakistan, I can declare that we do not possess nor do we intend to make a nuclear device. That is our policy. We are committed to a regional approach to the nuclear problem, and we remain ready to accept any safeguards, inspections, and verifications that are applied on a non-discriminatory regional basis. Pakistan has long advocated the creation of a nuclear weapon-free zone in the region. A first step in that direction could be a nuclear test ban agreement between Pakistan and its neighbors in South Asia. We are prepared for any negotiation to prevent the proliferation of nuclear weapons in our region. We will not provoke a nuclear arms race in the subcontinent. The United States has long held a commitment to peace in South Asia. It is a commitment which Pakistan shares. It is in this spirit of peace, of regional cooperation and bilateral partnership that I come before you today. This then must be our agenda: democracy and development, security and international cooperation. The people of Pakistan appreciate the assistance you have given us, the assistance which you continue to give us. Your military assistance has helped maintain a relative balance in the region. It has contributed to Pakistan's sense of security. It has strengthened the peace and stability of the South Asian region. Mr. Speaker, everywhere the sun is setting on the day of the dictator. In Pakistan, when the moment came, the transition was peaceful. The whole nation, farmers, workers, the soldiers and civilians, men and women, together heralded the return of democracy. The people have taken power in their hands, but our work has just begun. My friends, freedom is not an end. Freedom is a beginning. And in Pakistan, at long last, we are ready to begin. Our two countries stood together in the last decade to support the fight of the Afghan people for freedom. Let us stand together now as the people of Pakistan strive to give meaning to their newfound freedom. Come with us towards a tomorrow better than all the yesterdays we knew. History, the rush of events, perhaps even destiny, have brought me here today. I am proud to be the elected Prime Minister of Pakistan in this critical time. It is an awesome obligation, but in the words of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it. As a representative of the young, let me be viewed as one of a new generation of leaders unshackled by the constraints and irrational hatreds of the past. As a representative of women, let my message be, yes, you can. And as a believer of Islam in this august chamber, let my message be about a compassionate and tolerant religion, teaching hard work and family values under a merciful God. For that is the Islam I know, and that is the Islam we must all come to understand. For me and the people of Pakistan, the last 11 years have encompassed a painful odyssey. My countrymen and I did not see our loved ones die or tortured or lashed or languished in solitary confinement, deprived of basic human rights in order that others might again suffer such indignities. We sacrificed a part of our lives. We bore the pain of confronting tyranny to build a just society. We believed in ourselves, in our cause, in our people, and in our country. And when you believe, then there is no mountain high enough to scale. That is my message to the youth of America, to its women, and to its people. I thank you, distinguished friends.
The Fellows of Harvard College, the Honorable and Reverend the Board of Overseers, President of Radcliffe College, Chairman and members of the Board of Trustees of Radcliffe College, and the Mayor of Cambridge. Good morning.
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। नाज़रीन अस्सलाम वालेकुम। कल दोपहर वज़ीर-ए-आज़म पाकिस्तान मोहतरमा बेनज़ीर भुट्टो को हार्वर्ड यूनिवर्सिटी कैम्ब्रिज की जानिब से डॉक्टरेट ऑफ लॉ की एजाज़ी डिग्री दी गई। वज़ीर-ए-आज़म मोहतरमा बेनज़ीर भुट्टो दुनिया की वो पहली और वाहिद खातून रहनुमा हैं जिन्हें ये डिग्री दुनिया की बाहिम्मत खातून और कौम के लिए उम्मीद की अलामत करार देते हुए दी गई है। ये रंगारंग तकरीब यूनिवर्सिटी कैंपस के ओपन एयर थिएटर में मुनक्किद हुई। हार्वर्ड यूनिवर्सिटी की ये 338वीं सालाना तकरीब थी। इस सालाना तकरीब में 20,000 फारिग तहसील तलबा और उनके मेहमानों ने शिरकत की। हार्वर्ड यूनिवर्सिटी अमेरिका दुनिया भर का वो कदीम तरीन तालीमी इदारा है जो गुज़श्ता कई सदियों से आला तालीम के लिए काम कर रहा है। मोहतरमा बेनज़ीर भुट्टो का शुमार उन नोबेल इनाम याफ्ता और दूसरे आला अफराद में होता है जिन्होंने जिंदगी के मुख्तलिफ शोबों में बेहतरीन कारकर्दगी का मुजाहरा किया और उनको कानून की एजाजी डिग्री दी गई। मोहतरमा बेनज़ीर भुट्टो ने 1973 में रेड क्लिफ विमेंस कॉलेज से ग्रेजुएशन की। वज़ीर आज़म को एक जुलूस की शक्ल में यूनिवर्सिटी कैंपस लाया गया। अपनी आमद के फौरन बाद उन्होंने मेहमानों की किताब पर दस्तखत किए। जो ही ये जुलूस जलसागाह की जानिब रवाना हुआ, दोनों जानिब कतार में खड़े हुए सियाह गाउन में मलबूस 5,000 से ज्यादा एलुमनीज ने वज़ीर आज़म को खुशामदीद कहा। इस तकरीब में यूनिवर्सिटी के साबिक तालिब इल्मों, उनके मेहमानों, प्रोफेसर्स और डीन्स ने शिरकत की। वज़ीर आज़म तकरीब में शिरकत के लिए तशरीफ लाईं तो तेज बारिश शुरू हो गई। यूनिवर्सिटी के सदर डेरिक बोक ने वज़ीर आज़म को एजाजी डिग्री दी।
We are honored to have her with us and look forward to her words and thoughts this afternoon. It is a great privilege to present to you and this audience the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Benazir Bhutto, honorand in law.
Everyone on their feet again, and rightly so. This courageous woman who has suffered so much from the hanging of her father to isolation in prison, and who has now emerged as one of the world's truly courageous leaders. Radcliffe graduate of 1973.
Not yet 36 years old.
Benazir Bhutto, Doctor of Laws, Harvard hails a brave and distinguished daughter, leading her nation toward a hopeful future.
She will be the principal speaker along with President Bach this afternoon at the alumni exercises.
And now, in the name of this Society of Scholars, I declare that these 10 new alumni are entitled to the rights and privileges pertaining to their several degrees, and that their names are to be forever borne on our roll of honorary members.
इस पूर्वकार तकरीब से खिताब करते हुए मोहतरमा बेनज़ीर भुट्टो ने कहा,
President Bach, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. President Bach, members of the Board of Overseers, new graduates, and distinguished alumni, I feel honored to have been asked to make this commencement address to the class of 1989. But I would like to begin by first of all congratulating all those who have been awarded degrees today. Not too long ago, I sat where you now sit. I can vividly recall the effort your degrees represent. Tramping to class in subarctic temperatures, fighting for books at Hillis Library, cramming for exams, and at times staying awake all night to complete a term paper. Today is a day of celebration, and I am privileged to share it with you. But while I am greatly honored by the degree you have conferred on me, and grateful, President Bok, for the words in your citation, you will understand that I regard this honor as more than a personal recognition. I consider it an affirmation of the universality of the principles of democracy, liberty, and human rights. It was here that the first successful struggle against European imperialism began. It was here, under the banner, no taxation without representation, that the idea of government by the consent of the governed first gained currency. Cambridge and Harvard were my cradle of liberty too. I arrived here from a country that in my lifetime had not known democracy or political freedom. As an undergraduate, I was constantly reminded of the value of democracy by the history of freedom that permeates this place. It was not just the history of democracy that inspired me. It was above all the concrete expression of it. My Harvard years, 1969 to 1973, coincided with growing frustration over U.S. policy in Southeast Asia. This was particularly true in the campuses where students were in the forefront of those protesting the Vietnam War. For me, there were demonstrations on Boston Commons and in Washington, mass meetings at Harvard Stadium. Some American commentators argued that division over Vietnam signaled American weakness. I saw it as a measure of America's greatness, a reflection of democracy in action, of an open society which, because it was open, had the means of regeneration and revitalization. In the Pakistan of those days, the press did not criticize the government because the government controlled the press. While I was a junior at Harvard, Pakistan initiated an experiment in democracy. That experience is instructive. As 1971 ended, Pakistan was in ruins. A third of the territory and 1/2 of the population was gone, the result of a military defeat precipitated by military repression in what was then known as East Pakistan. War and mismanagement had left our treasury empty and our economy in shambles. The elected Prime Minister negotiated an honorable peace with the victor. He secured the return of the prisoners of war and put the economy back on its feet. He initiated a program of social and economic reform to benefit the poor and the dispossessed, who are the majority in our land. All this was done, I might add, at a time of global economic recession brought about by the oil shocks of the 70s. But what then happened? As is the case in democracies, the political process again became rambunctious. Opposition politicians challenged the elected government. They challenged it in the press, at the polls, and in the streets. The military, whose dignity was restored by the elected government, moved in to end the squabbling amongst politicians. The new dictatorship proved more brutal, more determined to stay in power than any of its predecessors. Elections were promised and cancelled. The elected Prime Minister was arrested and then, under the cloak of judicial proceedings, murdered. Flogging, imprisonment, and execution became the staple of political life in our land. Under circumstances that were as remarkable as they were unexpected, Pakistan got a second chance at democracy last fall. It is an opportunity that we must not now lose. In our first act, I am happy to say, our government freed all political prisoners and commuted all death sentences. We restored the freedom of speech, freedom of association, and freedom of the press. In the National Assembly, there is a lively opposition, and for the first time in our history, the state-owned television provides full coverage of their activities. Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who recently visited me in Islamabad, once wrote that if you are in a country where the newspapers are filled with good news, you can be sure that the jails are filled with good men. Even a casual review of our press would serve to confirm the opposite of the senator's statement. Around the world, democracy is on the march. In the last decade, Pakistan is only the most recent country to change course and return to democracy. But we must be realistic. We must recognize that democracy, particularly emerging democracy, can be fragile. I have already cited the experience of our last democratic government, but the example is not confined to Pakistan alone. In the Philippines, Mrs. Aquino's 3-year-old democracy has already survived several coup attempts. In Argentina, there have been half a dozen military rebellions. In Peru, narcotics and terrorism threaten a 15-year-old experiment in democracy. Democracy needs support, and the best support for democracy comes from other democracies. Already there is an informal network to support democracy. Annually, the United States prepares a report on human rights in every country. In prison, I was heartened to learn that the Congress had linked U.S. assistance to Pakistan in the Pell Amendment to the restoration of full civil liberties and representative government in Pakistan. Friends of democracy in other countries, including Britain, Canada, and Germany, sent delegations to investigate human rights abuses in Pakistan. Our elections last November were made easier by the presence of observers sponsored by the United States, Britain, and the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. This informal network for democracy can and should be strengthened. Democratic nations should forge a consensus around the most powerful political idea in the world today, the right of a people to freely choose their government. Having created a bond through evolving such a consensus, democratic nations should then come together in an association designed to help each other and promote what is a universal value, democracy. Not every democracy organizes itself in the same way, nor does every democracy express itself the same way. But there are two elements I consider essential to all democracies. These are, one, the holding of elections at regular intervals, open to the participation of all significant political parties, that are fairly administered, and where the franchise is broad or universal, and respect for fundamental human rights, including freedom of expression, freedom of conscience, and freedom of association. There are several ways in which members of an association of democratic nations can help each other. One way is to ensure the impartiality of elections. After all, democracy as a system of government can only work when all participants in the political process accept the verdict of the people. For the verdict to be accepted as legitimate, elections must not only be fair, but they must also be seen to be fair. In my country, many of those who resisted dictatorship, the heroes of our democratic struggle, were young men and women of your age. Many of them endured long periods of incarceration and faced charges on political trials that were a travesty of truth and justice. Many suffered the worst forms of torture and humiliation, of the physical punishment of flogging. Indeed, many had to make the supreme sacrifice of their lives. I can never forget what they endured. I can only strive with all my strength to give meaning to what they sought, those simple but priceless freedoms that you here perhaps take for granted. But it is faith that inspired and provided sustenance to our democratic struggle. Faith in the righteousness of our cause. Faith in the Islamic teaching that tyranny cannot long endure. How wrong, therefore, is the picture that is often painted about Pakistan as a country that cannot be democratic because it is Muslim. I have often heard the argument that a Muslim country as such cannot have or work democracy. But I stand before you, a Muslim woman, the elected Prime Minister of 100 million Muslims, a living refutation of such arguments. This has happened because the people of Pakistan have demonstrated time and again that their faith in the inherent right to fundamental freedoms is irrepressible. This love for freedom and human rights owes a considerable degree to the colonial legacy and to the example of Western democratic institutions. But it arises fundamentally from the strong egalitarian spirit that pervades Islamic traditions. The Holy Book calls upon Muslims to resist tyranny. Dictatorship in Pakistan, however long, have therefore always collapsed in the face of this spirit. Islam, in fact, has a strong democratic ethos with its emphasis on justice, on equality, on the brotherhood of men and women, on government by consultation. Its essence is democratic. Pakistan is heir to an intellectual tradition of which the illustrious exponent was the poet and philosopher Muhammad Iqbal. He saw the future course for Islamic societies in a synthesis between adherence to the faith and adjustment to the modern age. It is this tradition which continues to inspire the people of Pakistan in their search for their own way of life amidst competing ideologies and doctrines. Tolerance, open-mindedness, pursuit of social justice, emphasis on the values of equality and social concord, and encouragement of scientific inquiry are some of its hallmarks. These are the hallmarks that the founder of Pakistan, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, propounded. These are the hallmarks Pakistan's first democratic Prime Minister, Martyr Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, tried to live up to. Intensely devoted as the pioneers of this tradition were to the Islamic spirit, they were also strongly opposed to bigotry in all their forms. Xenophobia or prejudice against other civilizations, Western or non-Western, was repugnant to their outlook. It is this heritage that has enabled me to take on the awesome responsibilities of the Prime Ministership of my country. As my country stands on the threshold of greater freedom and sets the priorities that will take it into the 21st century, we draw our inspiration from what the poet-philosopher Iqbal said, and what is universally applicable. Life is reduced to a rivulet under dictatorship, but in freedom, it becomes a boundless ocean. This is true in Pakistan and on every continent on earth. Let all of us who believe in freedom join together for the preservation of liberty. My message is, democratic nations unite. Before I take your leave, Mr. President, Mrs. Horner, and other distinguished guests, I know that there are students graduating today, and there's something that I would like to say, especially for them. When I was an undergraduate at Radcliffe or Harvard, I used to conduct Crimson Key tours for newcomers. And we Crimson Key tour guides had our own special lines. One of them related to the Institute of Fine Arts, and it went, "The famous architect Le Corbusier designed this building, but the constructors got the plan upside down." As you go out in the world, perhaps you will sometimes find things a little upside down. In the words of the Latin scholar of today, I can only repeat, you will go, you will see, and you will reform. And in so doing, you will live up to the Harvard motto, Veritas. Thank you.